Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode number 13 of the 77 Group's YouTube channel, presentations on alternating weeks on effective communication and on effective leadership. I'm Frank Leone, as I think many of you know by this time, and episode 13 is entitled Don't Be a Chatterbox, and it is drawn from chapter 9 of my book. And as an overview, what we're really talking about here is a version of the old 80-20 rule. 80-20 rules can mean a variety of different things, but one of the most common applications of it is that in conversation, best that one speaks 20% of the time or less, and let the other party speak 80% of the time or more. And I have found over and over again in dealing with other people, in other words, being on the receiving end of communication, that it is something that is grossly violated over and over and over again. And I find it very difficult to deal with. Somebody that just goes on and on and on, dominates your conversation, doesn't stop, doesn't pause, doesn't take a breath, and it causes all sorts of problems. But there's a lot of ways to deal with this and to mitigate it, and we'll go forward with it as we go through the presentation. So let me turn it back to my colleague, Mitch Goddard, for a little overview of what's going on these days.
Hey, Frank, great. Looking forward to today's material and all your tips. Anyway, so my name is Mitch Goddard, co-founder and principal of the 77 Group, along with my partner, Frank. And we are involved with our YouTube channel to share insights from our books, Frank's book, which we'll be talking about today, 77 Ways to Perfect Your Communication Skills, Enhancing Your Personal and Professional Relationships, and then my book on leadership, 77 Principles, Tips, and Takeaways for Exceptional Leaders. And we agree that both our areas of expertise really marry together very nicely. And what we're doing here on our YouTube channel is once a week. Frank's got the odd weeks, I've got the even weeks. This being week 13, we'll hear from Frank as he talks and explores a little deeper on the topic of effective communication. And then I'll pick up, say, next week or on the even weeks, talking about leadership. And each of our books have 77 chapters, so you can count on us being around for a total of 154 episodes weekly here on YouTube. And we hope that you get something out of this, because that's really our goal here, is to give our experience away, share it with people, and hopefully it'll be useful for you. Also, with regard to Frank's book, which is now available, by the way, at 77 Group, 77grp.com. Just go to the bookshelf there. You can order Frank's book, now available in hardcover, softcover, and soon to be available on audiobook and ebook formats. So look for that. And then very soon, you'll also be able to pick it up on Amazon. Anyway, each week we also ask for your questions, your comments, and the author of that week will pick the question of the week and offer a free 15-20-minute phone call between the author and the question writer to explore whatever it is that's on their mind. Just a little added benefit for us to further connect with our audience, because we really appreciate you subscribing, being a part of this whole experience. And if you like what you see, please tell us by hitting like, share your comments with us, and it'll work for all of us. So with that, I'm going to kick it on back over to Frank. Sorry, just changed your name for you. Who's going to talk to us about Don't Be a Chatterbox from chapter 9 of his book. Frank, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mitch, and thank you for mentioning the book. And I just before I go through my 5 tips, want to mention again what we're trying to do, because I think it's really critical. This is post-retirement for me. I sold a company back in 2016, thought I was done, and Years later now, this book has come out, and we thought that it would really be valuable to not only have the book out in circulation, but to concurrently be doing these weekly YouTube broadcasts, these weekly YouTube episodes, taking a different chapter of my book, and Mitch is coming up with a book in a month or two himself, and alternating chapters out of each of our books. So one can read the book and not watch the YouTube channel. One can watch the YouTube channel and not read the book. Or the really shrewd ones out there in YouTube land can watch the complimentary YouTube channel, but also get a copy of the book. And here it is, right there. It's the hardcover version. I always like to show that we have nice photos of each of us. See Mitch and I in there. To buy a copy of the book and to actually do both. And what we're trying to do is make each week very, very clear. Here's 5 tips on that chapter's topic, and really sort of drill down on those 5 things, feeling that 5 times 77, I got to do my math here, that's 360 some odd, maybe 370 different tips over a course of 77 different presentations from each of us, that even if you take 10% of those and apply them, that's 37 new things that you've incorporated into your communication skill set. So that is our goal. And I have 5 tips. And tip number 1, under the topic, don't be a chatterbox and practice the 80-20 rule, is practice makes almost perfect. And the point here is that it's one thing for me to say, hey, here's the tip. Don't talk more than 20% of the time in any conversation. You're having a conversation professional, you're having a personal conversation, whatever it may be. Try to learn to become a good listener, absorb information, and let the other party know that you're genuinely interested in what they have to say. So, it'd be one thing to say, hey, go ahead and take that advice and move forward. And some of you may do that. But the reality is that it's something that the more you proactively practice doing each and every day, the sooner you're going to get to that. I found it, once I realized how important it was, I found it took me years to really get to the point that I wanted to get to, being the 2080 listener that hopefully I am today. And I got to that point by trying, self-assessing, realizing I fell short, understanding why I fell short, trying the next day, and so forth and so on. So practice makes almost perfect is the first tip. Practice it each and every day.
Very good, and a great lead-off tip today, Frank. And it sounds like it just requires some deliberate discipline and self-evaluation whenever you're involved in some kind of communicative exchange with somebody else, to really keep it top of mind, so you don't backslide and turn right back into a chatterbox.
Makes sense.
Yep.
Okay. Tip number 2, if you're ready for that, everybody, is seldom interrupt others. Now, I could have easily said, don't interrupt others, and that would have been sound advice, but that's an absolute, and there's times when there's exceptions. So I modified tip number 2 to state seldom interrupt others. And one thing that I deal with all the time, I find very, very difficult to deal with, is speaking with somebody that does not stop talking. They just keep on going and going and going. And you can understand sometimes why people do that they want to be thorough, that they have a lot on their mind and they want to share it, that they want to impress you with the vastness of their information. But the fact of the matter is that the more they say, the more likely it is that you are going to get lost somewhere along the line. However, that said, be very, very careful in your discussions with other people not to interrupt them unless absolutely necessary. I find that oftentimes I'm on the phone. I'd say the most common scenario is when you're dealing with the inevitable issues that come up and you have to get somebody from customer service to deal with it. and they're answering a question, and they just keep on going and going and going and get way beyond your area of interest and what you need to know. And I find that it's very hard not to say, hey, come on, I understand, I got it. Let's go on and address the heart of the question. But I think I've learned over time to try to be as patient as possible and not to interrupt people, even if I feel they are drifting off into something they shouldn't be, or if they're grossly violating the 80-20 rule. So my suggestion is to try to have discipline and seldom interrupt others. There comes a time that you need to, but try to push that time off as much as you can.
Excellent tip, Frank, and I think easy, really, to understand, a little harder to apply. So what do you got for tip number 3?
It's called See the Forest, Not the Trees. And one of the great things about writing the book is that I humbly learned a lot of things that I didn't know. Shout out to Joan Tapper and Isabel Walker, who both did editing of the book, and extraordinary people as well as editors. But Joan found in the book, when I said, see the forest through the trees, she says, no, that's not the correct quote. It's see the forest, not the trees. So one of those things I've been going my whole life erroneously stating. So for the sake of being accurate, it is see the forest, not the trees. But the point here is that every word that you say that deviates from the central message that you're trying to get across is diminishing the impact of that central message. The more verbiage that's out there, the less likely it is that they're going to get their arms around the key information that you want to get across. So very importantly, I think the very first, episode 1 was called Chop, 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 and was all about saying what you need to say in as few words as possible. And this is sort of its cousin, basically saying staying focused on message and watch extraneous diversions from that message, because when you do that, you are detracting from the impact of that message. And, a person can only take so much away from a person's discourse, and you want them to take what they need to take away.
That's excellent, and a great reminder, Frank, that when we talk too much, our message gets lost. The core message just gets rolled up in everything else, and it's hard for the listener to pick it out. So that's an awesome takeaway right there. What do you got for tip number 4, Frank?
Tip number 4 is do not fear silence. Famous song from many years ago. I may be way off on this one, but I think it may have been the Tremolos, and I think that Four Seasons also covered that song, but it's called Silence is Golden. And it is so true. It is so true in conversation, and is so much part of the 80-20 rule. And once again, it's a thing that is constantly violated, that so often people are really afraid when they are speaking to have any silence between sentences. And what that basically does is creates an environment where it's harder to absorb what the other party is saying. It does not give them a break. It creates speaker fatigue, or I guess listener fatigue is what I'm really trying to say. So it's really important to understand that not only is it not a bad thing, but it's a very good thing. It gives all parties a chance to catch their breath, and nothing's wrong with that. So at the end of anything, just sort of pause and then continue on. Silence is golden.
Excellent. Is there ever a time when the speaker should be concerned about extended pauses or extended moments of silence? Anything that comes to mind that might make that concerning?
Well, it depends how you define the word extended. Extended could be 5 minutes, it could be 5 seconds, it could be a minute. It could be a lot of different things. Generally not, Mitch. I really, unless it's so overt that makes people think something is seriously wrong, it's not really a problem. But then again, it depends upon the audience. It depends upon sort of the style of the speaker and so forth. So like a lot of other things, there's not a lot that's cast in absolute concrete, that circumstances and personal styles dictate as much as the rules themselves.
Excellent. Okay, great tip. Number 5, Frank, what you got?
One of my favorites, use verbal cues. This is something that I have mastered over the years and really tried to employ. And what this basically says is that you don't want to interrupt, but you do want to slow down the other party. And I find that when the other party is speaking too fast or too continuously or for too long a period of time without taking a breath, I lose them. And when I lose them, they are lost. I'm behind now. It's like reading a book and turning 3 pages ahead and reading from there. You've missed something and you can never really catch up with it in a conversation. So it's really important to find a way to slow them down. And the way that I like to slow them down within the parameters of showing them respect and letting them speak their piece is by offering what I call short verbal cues. Things like, yes, I understand. I see. Good point. Go ahead. Things like that, where just for a second, you pause them for a second or a second and a half. But that second and a half gives them a chance to take a breath, gives you a chance, your ears a chance to rest as well, so you can get back on the, on the gravy train there and understand what they are saying. So using verbal cues, and again, examples of verbal cues are, yes, I understand. Good point. Tell me more. Whatever it takes just to throw in some words along the way. It also reinforces the fact that you're actively listening, which is very important. You want to come across as somebody that is focused on what the other party's saying, not somebody that is absolutely disinterested in it.
Excellent. As you say that, the image that comes to mind is gentle verbal speed bumps, basically, to kind of slow people down to make what they're saying a little easier to digest and process.
Very good image. Yes, I would agree with that.
Okay, excellent. 5 great, top-notch, easy-to-apply tips to be a wonderful and effective communicator. Any other thoughts on that as we begin to wind things down here on episode 13, Frank?
No, just employ it today and tomorrow and let it go from there.
Amen. Amen. Excellent. All right, folks. So anyway, we are getting ready to wrap things up here. Next, coming up, we post these every Sunday night. So you subscribers will get alerted, and you new viewers, please subscribe so you don't miss any content. And again, just a reminder, please send us your comments and your questions to us. We love picking those best questions out each week, highlighting them on our on future episodes, and then extending the invitation for a personal phone call. And to that end, Frank, who's your question of the week for this week?
I do have one, and this is from let's see, this is from episode 11, so the last one that I did. And the person asks, I am a late night person. How can I use that to best play my biorhythms? And it's sort of funny. It's from Sleepy Steve McWilliams. Sleepy Steve. So Sleepy Steve, I can see why you're sleepy if you stay up all night. You got to go to bed every now and then. But in any event, I think the point here was that the whole message of episode number 11 was to play to your biorhythms. Be certain that you're at your peak state of mind and a peak state of body function when you're engaged in an important meeting or public presentation or even individual conversation. So we talked about that. I think what Sleepy Steve is saying as well, he's really sharp, 11 o'clock at night, there's nobody around to deal with. How does he deal with that? And my answer is, number one, that that this whole issue of playing to your biorhythms is not strictly confined to verbal interchanges. It's also a very good time to do everything in writing. The book that we've talked about at some depth, I wrote that over, I don't know, 10 weeks maybe. And I wrote it pretty much every day, but every day for maybe an hour and a half or 2 hours a day. And those hour and a half or 2 hours were always like 7 to 9 in the morning when I was really at my sharpest. So I was able to cleverly schedule the writing of the book at a time when I was mentally sharpest. So my first message to Steve is at least play the game in terms of writing things to other people. In terms of speaking, you basically then have to go to tier 2, that within the normal working hours, when are you at your sharpest? Yeah, you may be totally at your sharpest at 10 o'clock at night, but if you're comparing 8 in the morning to noon to 3 in the afternoon, how do those 3 times stack up? And within those 3 options, where are you your sharpest? And once you've determined that, that's when you should try to really emphasize scheduling any verbal interchanges. So that's, thanks, Steve. I appreciate it. Always love to get these questions. Always fun to get them. So please keep the questions, the subscriptions, and the likes going. It's what we live for here as YouTube channel people. So thank you. Thanks, Steve.
Excellent. And thanks, Steve, again, for both of us. We love, like Frank says, we love the interaction with you, and we hope that keeps going, because that really makes it worth it for us. Frank, closing thought.
Closing thought, also want to remind people, Mitch told us what he's going to be dealing with next week in episode 14. Episode 15, just so you know, looking ahead, is called Qualify, Always Qualify. For those of you that have the book, it's chapter 13, even though we're doing it for episode 15. So, please read up on it 2 weeks from now when I'll be coming forward with that. But in any event, my final thought, and again, Mitch and I are alternating weeks now on this, where I'll share my thought when I'm the featured speaker, and Mitch will share his when he's the featured speaker. Just our hope that we could share something that we've learned in our long careers and somewhat long lives up to this point, and that might be of value to other people. And my personal thought for this week is to respect other opinions. Easier said than done, especially in a world where in so many respects the world is becoming dichotomized, and we're seeing more people go to opposite corners of the ring rather than meeting in the middle of the ring. And something I've learned, sometimes the hard way, but I've learned over the years that give everybody the benefit of the doubt. And even if they're saying something that you clearly disagree with, hear them out, probe them, ask them questions about it. Well, why do you feel this way? What do you think is going to happen? And listen, and don't always respond. You do not have to respond to something. If you don't agree, silence is golden, to coin a phrase. Just don't really say anything at this point, and think about it and try to learn something. I think one thing I've really learned is very seldom is an opinion totally void of any merit. No matter what side of an issue you're on, there's usually some merit on both sides. So try to be open-minded in that regard, and certainly don't react if you don't agree with the person. Try to absorb it for a while and move forward. Maybe some exceptions to this every now and then when it's essential to get your point across because of an impending issue. But short of that, it's something probably worth sleeping on. So that's my closing thought for this week.
And a great one at that, Frank. I think everyone listening, and even those that aren't listening, everywhere in every corner of the world, when people respect each other's opinions, then good, fruitful conversations can usually come out of that. So well done, Frank. All right, everyone. Well, that concludes episode 13 here on the 77 channel, 77 group channel. I'm thankful, and speaking for my partner Frank and I, we're both very thankful you tuned in this week. Make sure you join us next week for episode 14, where I'll be covering leadership principle number 9, I believe. number 25, which is why it's important for leaders to get organized and be prepared. We'll cover that next week here on the 77 Group channel. For my partner, Frank Leone, and I, my name is Mitch Goddard. Thanks for joining us. We are the 77 Group.
And thank you very much for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Bye.